Okay. Niktam Rosh. If the top of the lulav got chipped off. Now, there was a machlokes Rashi and Tosfos in the Mishnah what Niktam Rosh meant. Rashi learned it meant the top leaf was Niktam. Tosfos says it doesn't make sense to say that because it says if the whole top leaf is missing, it's possible. So if the whole top leaf is missing is possible, so vice versa, Niktam alone won't be possible. So there's a couple of different shatim the Tosfos has to make the two Mishnayos stim. One is that could be Niktam is even uglier than if the whole leaf is taken off. And that's why Niktam alone is possible, yet if the whole leaf is removed, it's possible. Well, a different reason. On Niktam Roshai, one of the Tosfos learns is that all of the tips of all the leaves are chipped off. We only learned that if it's niktam, if the top of the leaf was chipped off, aval nistak, but if it's split, kosher. Rashi's nistak means nistaku rashi alan. If the tips of the leaves were split, that would be kosher. Frak the Gemara, if nistak kosher is nistak kosher, but Tanya we learned lulav kafuf. And Rashi says, "Kafif is rosha, kafif ka'agmon." The top of the lulav is like hunched over. Doimel ish gaban v'azaken, like an old humpback person. Shoshein sachin ukufuf lamate. Their heads bend down. So if the top of the lulav looks like that, or kavets, Rashi says kavets means sheyoytin b'shedr shaloi uktin timinkutin. So out of the shedra, there's thorns coming out. Soduk, split, which is what we just discussed earlier, which was kosher. Akum, doimelamagal. Rashi says chadamilsi. It's one comment. Akum doimelamagal, bent over, looks like a sickle. The halachas will be possible. So the problem is, we just said soduk is kosher, and this brisa says soduk is possible. Let's do the breakfast later. Chorus. Rashi says that means kasha, shenasa chari, said it hardened. Shekain derech halulav, the lulav olav noishim b'yimashak shaman. Its leaves fall off in the winter. Vashedra miskasha v'nasaids, and the actual spine of the lulav hardens like a hard piece of wood. So choris puzzle, doimul choris kasher. What does doimul choris mean? Rashi says hiskal miskasha. It's starting to harden. So it's a little more rigid than it's in its fresh state, but it's not hard like a hard piece of wood. So the problem is the Bryce here says Sadik Puzzle. Yet we were just medayik, the Hunu was just medayik, that Nistak is kosher. From our Papa, where do we say that Sadik is Puzzle? Is the Ovid Kehimnik. So Rashi, what does it mean? The Ovid Kehimnik? Our Papa, how do we tell you Sadik is Puzzle? It doesn't mean that the tips of the leaves or the shedra is split, because that in fact is kosher, like Rafuna said. Rather, it's the Ovid Kehimnik is poitzifer, shal barzel, shal soifrim. It's some type of point that the soifrim have with which to draw the lines on the plot. She has like shnei Russian. It has two heads to it. Roja echad mefutzel. And one, I think, Mefutzal, I think means it's like a point. Let's see what the Dalet says. Shiroshe Mefutzal, yeah. He takes it out. Kach Gadol Alulav, that's how the lulav grew. Kiminsteshid voice. It has two spines, Machtas al Nakan and Machtas al Nakan. Imagine if the spine of the lulav was split and the leaves that come out of the left side came out of the left spine, and the leaves that come out of the right side come out of the right spine. Our lulavim, there's one spine that have leaves on the right and leaves on the left. But this is the spine itself split. So that's going to be possible. The Ovid Kehimnik. That's the Sadik that means possible. The spine is split down the middle and it's like two spines. But if the leaves on top are split, there Rav Huna says that the lulav is kosher. Amar Ava, Loy Amrin, Ella Lefanav. This that we say that there's a problem if it's okum, If it's
Yes,
bent,
yes.
it's bent over, that's only just bent towards the front. So when you're holding the lulav, if it's bent towards you. If it leans slightly to the back, for Yosy, that's really what it's supposed to be like. The lulav, it's normal for it to have a small curvature towards the back.
Yes, yes.
So that's the Gemara. Yes.
Sorry. So I'm just trying to understand, like, when I'm thinking about a lulav and the spine and the leaves, to me, it's like all one piece and it just goes to the top, right? So where does the leaves end and the spine begin? So I'm wondering, like, how far down does the leaf have to split where it's still not the spine? Like the way you're talking, right?
Well, the way I visualize it is the spine is the thick green stem that runs up the center.
Right. And then the
And
leaves are
all the
just
pieces on the
everything to the
side are
side?
leaves. I'm sorry?
Okay. So then really the leaves really run all the way down pretty
Well, the
much.
top leaf doesn't run all the way down to the bottom of the spine, but the leaves are very long leaves.
Right. So
And the bottom leaf doesn't go all the way up to the top. Usually they're like overlapping.
right. So I'm wondering where would the split be that was
Split would be dead center. So when you hold your lulav, it looks. Not look, that's the way it is. There's a green thick spine in the middle, and then there's leaves that come out on either side. Imagine if the spine
right.
right
So
down the middle.
right. So if it could split, because we always look at the tip, right? But according to this, it could split anywhere down the side, pretty much.
Well, usually the split starts at the top and then it stretches down the side. Technically, if you took a utility knife, you could split it in the middle. But the way it would split naturally, usually it would start at the top and then spread.
Mhm.
I don't even know what would Allah be if it's split in the middle. Because if it's split in the middle, it wouldn't really separate, right? The two sides will only separate
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
if it's split on the top. Because Litzud says, but I think that this thing that Rav is talking about is a curvature towards the front and towards the back, not towards the right and towards the left. So if there's a curvature on the spine and a little bit towards the back, that's kibriyose. That's normal. But if there's a curvature towards you when you hold the lulav, that's a problem. So let's see Rashi. It's a curvature towards the back, but which is normal. Lafanov is not a problem. Okay, let's see what the Rashi means. Lafanov latzad shekeneged shedra. The tzad that's opposite the shedra. Shedra zeu tzad ha'asi k'shedra shel behema. The shedra is the part that's looks like the spine of a behema. The spinal vertebrae and the ribs connect to it, the kind of on either side. Then and the center of chalak is smooth, but either kamachal it goes up like a smooth stick. Kamar Nachman, the tzadin kilfan of them. If the lulav leans to one or the other side, that's puzzle. It's like lefanav. That's not the way it's supposed to be. The Army law, and there are those who say it's kalachav dami. If there's a slight curvature to the right or to the left, that is normal. Mamarava, haidu lava, the solid b'chat hutza. If you have a lulav that goes up in one hutza, which means shekol olav mitzarechad, all of its leaves are only on one side. Balmumu, that's called a balmum, and it's possible. Okay, let's see the head of the Gemara about there. I wonder if there's pictures of this. I believe I have pictures of it in this Gemara. I should really take advantage of the pictures. Mechi has pictures. I think I have pictures too. Let me see. There's a lot of beautiful pictures in this Gemara that they give us. So let me see if we can take advantage of it a little bit. Yeah, we do have such pictures in here. So let's see if I can find them. Oh, we have a whole bunch of. We have our Nikta Marisha, this looks olive. Let's see what we have over here. The shedder is broken. Nifridu olive. Let's see if we could find the because I'm looking for Lamed Aleph, so I'm looking for Lamed Beis actually. So yes, let's look for Lamed Beis. Nifridu. Oh, here we are. Oh, here we go. This is what we're looking for. Oh, thank you very much, Matthew. Once you know how it works, it's much easier. Okay, so this is the Akam Daim Lamagal, where it's bent. There's a picture of a magal. It says Achayev Kibriyasa, who was bent to the back. That's normal. Okay, now let's see what. And here's the studden. Okay, which is good. Okay. Oh, David Hemnik we have. Oh, so a Hemnik is like a scribe tool that's used to make two holes, and that's how it describes the split of the lulav. Let's see what else we have over here. Yeah, I think that covers all of our pictures. David Hemnik, it's side to side. Okay, let's see weiter. Zot the hele Gemara. Nifratu olav. Amar Papa. The Papa said, Nifratu. What does Nifratu mean? The Ovid kichufya. It's made like a broom. Rashi's kichufya ashkuva. Shaboy mechabdin esabayis. It's what you use to sweep a home. Well, oisin oisa me'alon shalulov. We normally make a broom with the leaves of a little hatalushin me'achedra that are pulled off of the shedra. Well, oigdin mehen harbe b'yachad, and we tie them all together. So if the lulav is spread out, it looks like a broom. That's going to be nifratu. I think we said is kosher. You have to tie together. Nifradu the ifrit fruit. What does nifradu mean? If ifrit reshain nifradin ka'anfe dekel the ein mitzum tamim mashedra. So I'm sorry. So if we look back to the Mishnah, I think nifratu was possible and nifradu was kosher. Because nifratu means to pull off. So what does the Mishnah say? It says nifratu all of our puzzle and nifratu are kosher, and the Rebbe said you should tie them together. So nifratu means if they're totally dislodged from the lulav, then they're puzzle. But if they're merely separated, they're still kosher, and the Rebbe said you should tie them together. What if the center leaf was split? The two top leaves in the center, color. So this does not grow out of the side of the shedra. The very top of the shedra goes into a double leaf. And these two leaves, which are supposed to be bonded together, ended up separating. The nistaka shedra ad ha'alim shalamatim. And how far did it split? The whole leaf split, including the pulp of the shedra itself, until the place where the lower leaves connect. Why is it called tiyumas? Let's see if we have a picture of that, of nechlaka tiyumas. Nechlaka tiyumas, right over here. So it shows it has the lulav showing stood in the center, and then this area is magnified. Where you see the center leaf was torn apart all the way down to the second. I think this is what most people are checking for when they look at a lulav. And when you go look for a lulav, that's what you're checking for, nechlaka tiyumas. And you check until you get frustrated, and then you go and buy the dairy one because it's ready to go. Okay, so let's see what the head of the Gemara says. So nachlaka hatiyumas ma'atosh madam rabbichna rabbishuv and Levi nitla hatiyumas pasur. If the whole tiyumas is removed, it's going to be pasur. What does nitla mean? Is it Rashi? Well, Rashi doesn't say, which means if it's taken off. So if it's taken off, says the Gemara, ma'lav hu de nechlaka. Maybe the same halacha as nitla should be nechlaka because it's also missing completely. It's opened up. Nitla shiny. Maybe it's worse if it's completely removed than if it's just split. Because it's completely missing. That would be worse. So you don't have a raya or a shaila of nechlaka. Ikadami. There are those who say, Rab Yochanan, Rab Shuban Levi, nechlaka tiyomis. If the tiyomis got split, nasa kamisha nitla tiyomis would possible. Then it will be possible, which I think is the way we pass them. I think that's why we make such a big deal about focusing on the tip of the lulav. In the case of a nifrida, where the leaves are just not sticking to the side of the lulav and they're spreading out, you should tie them together. Tanya we learned. Kapos tomorrow. Kapos, we learned it should be kafos. In hoya parod, if they're separating yechav senu. And yesterday we learned on Amud Beis that Rabbi Huda's reasoning for having to tie the lulav is not because it shall look nice. It's not because of hodor. The reason why you tie the lulav is because of this pasuk that it has to be bound, that it has to be tied together. Who said kapos tamarim is referring to the lulav? Ema charusa beina kafos. Ema charusa. Maybe it's charusa zatrashi. Charusa ana fadekel micheniskasha stay shalom v'shalosh. Maybe maybe it's referring to the branch of the decal. After a couple of years, it gets hardened. The yoichin boy the lovin harder, and a lot of the lovin grow out of that wooden branch. Shenoshru aleim, whose leaves fell off, and the skashu gamheim, the nasu ate, and then they became hard. Zeh point lakan, the zeh point lakan, kanfi shari lonos. So maybe that's what it means. Maybe what it means is you have to take a big branch, a big trunk of a palm tree that already has lulavim that already hardened on it, and it's just this big assembly of wood and branches. It needs to be flexible so that if they spread out, you can tie them together. However, if you want to suggest that it's a much more mature part of the tree, where you have a big wooden branch in the middle, and then you have individual wooden branches growing out of it on the side, that's permanent. You can't tie that together. There's no way you could possibly tie all those hard wooden pieces that extend out from either side of the trunk to make them connected to the trunk, to tie them together. Which are cushioning. They're hard. So therefore, it cannot be charusa. We cannot be referring to a branch with multiple branches sticking out of it, because it wouldn't be able to be couples or couples. So look, Vema ufsa, the Rashi, Vema ufsa, ishtila, which is me'ikar dekel, it's from the main trunk of the palm tree, to chalakat smooth, the ein an v'yoytziv menu lakana lakan, she'ein lachkafas menu. In other words, maybe it's if you want to sort of be bound together, it should look like one. So take part of the trunk of the tree where there is nothing growing out of it. That's as unified as possible. There's nothing growing out of it at all. So the Gemara, it says kapois, which means mechlal di kaparim. It has to, if it says you have to sort of bind it together, you have to connect it. Mashu that Rashi shaparid mitchila about the kaisa. It's mashu that they are loose pieces that you tie together. So it can't be part of the trunk that's naturally one, because that wouldn't require couples. The high covers volume, and this branch, the center trunk, would be completely bound together. It doesn't need any time. The high covers volume. Maybe what it means is kufra. So Rashi, what's kufra? Hayunami eight in charusha. That's also similar to the charusha that we said earlier. Eladain ben shana oisteshana. It's not an older branch, like we said earlier, that's already 2-3 years old, that's hardened. Maybe it's only 1 or 2 years old, where it's still relatively soft. It didn't become that hard yet. And therefore, since there's still somewhat, its branches are still somewhat flexible, you'll be able to bend the branches that are extending out of the trunk by tying them together. And you are able to tie it together with the main trunk. Maybe that's what we need to have a lulav. Amar Abaye, Hashem gives us some mitzvahs that are easy and geshmak to do. The elu, Zot Rashi, asuyim kekoitzim. They're like thorns, v'yoitzim, but uksin harbe. You must start and say daim. That's charusa, which is a hardened trunk that has hardened or semi-hardened branches coming out of it. If you do that, that's not going to be geshmak. You're going to scratch yourself, you're going to hurt yourself. And we know that the Torah is given in a beautiful way, and Hashem, the mitzvahs that He commands us to do are beautiful mitzvahs. They're not mitzvahs that are going to be very frustrating to deal with. Omle Rabba to swallow Ravina. The emetarte. Maybe Zakrashi. Maybe tarte copy the tamar. Maybe it should be 2 Zakrashi tamorim atzman. Maybe there should be 2 dates. The darker and Leah is harbe tluyim biyachad. Normally, dates grow in sort of like clusters. The mechabish lehem in their sort of clusters. The kohen lehem kaf truka. So maybe it means 2 clusters. So tomorrow kapois ksiv chada. We only want to have something that's only one. Vei machada. Maybe it's then only 1 cluster. So tomorrow. Can you say it again? It's written out of to mean that it's only one thing. So it wouldn't make sense to say that it's two clusters of dates, because it's something that's expressed in a singular fashion. So then, maybe it's just one cluster of dates. That's wouldn't, because kaf is out of kaf. Kaf koreloi b'chizid kapois al shem kafos and pruder. So it has to be referring to a lulav, which we know that it has to be tied together if the leaves start to separate. This description of kapois, it would only make sense to express it regarding the leaves of the lulav up against its shedra. That's the only way to learn it where it would make sense. But using this nusach of kapois wouldn't make sense to use to refer to the date itself, because it couldn't mean one cluster, because it says kapois without the lashon of one. Machi pointed out, and it couldn't be one cluster either, because it didn't say kaf. So therefore, we must apply it to the lulav itself, as we understand it, and kapois is referring to that it's something that could possibly separate from the shedra, and we're supposed to bind it together. Dr. Marvati, Sine Harabars, Shayar Kosher. And Rashi tells us what they are. So look, Rashi, Sine Harabars, so Lulavin, Shalahen, Pa'alin, Mu'atin B'Shedra. It's a lulav that has few leaves that grow out of the spine, and since they're few, Muruchakin, they're separated one from the other. Zela L'Mailim is a harbi. It's not like our lulavim where all of the leaves tend to overlap. Rather, the leaves are independent because they're separated from each other in height quite a bit. Therefore, one ends before the second one begins. They're also not such long individual leaves, they're much shorter. Sometimes even the tip of a lower leaf won't reach the part where the upper leaf grows out of the stem. By us, all of the places where the leaf grows out of the stem are covered by lower leaves. But the Tzidar Basel, it's not that way. So the Mishnah says it's kosher. The Amar Abaye, Loi Shanu, we didn't learn that it's kosher. Ela Sharoishel says, Magia l'tzadik b'shosah. Even if we're allowing Tzidar Basel, that's only if the place where every leaf grows out of the shedra at least is covered with the lower leaf. If the place where each leaf grows out is not covered by a lower leaf, possible that will be possible. Tanya Mechachi, we learned as well in the Braisa, Tina Harabaisa Psula. Break the more of Anan Kshera. Anan Kshera, we learned Namish the kosher. Lishmamina Kabaye, Shmamino, you have a right to buy it, that sometimes it's kosher, sometimes it's possible. It's kosher when the place where each leaf grows out of the stem of the lulav is covered by a lower leaf. If it's not, then it's going to be possible. Let's see the picture to explain that. These are geschmack pictures. I'm getting into these pictures. So it's on Lamed base. Let's look for Lamed base. I appreciate a good picture over here. Geschmack. So I'm showing Rosh Shazeh, Magia Letzad Ikroy Shazeh. Let me see if I can get it to focus. Okay, so here you go. So in this case, Rosh Magia Letzad, you can see that this leaf barely covers over where this leaf leaves. We just leave leaves from the main shedra. And here's a picture where the lower leaf is too short, it doesn't quite reach. So this is possible, but that is going to be kosher. Let's see the Gemara weiter. The Ika, the Ramila Mirma. There are those who express the same halacha that we learned, not with the Gemara first saying, not with the buyer first saying that some Tziner Basel are kosher, some are apostle, and then we bring a raya from the fact that it's two mishnayos. Some people say that the whole thing started by a kasha. What does Rashi say? The Ika, the Mirma Mirma. First there was a steer asked between the Mishnah and the Brisa. The Agav Rami did too. Itmar da Abai l'shneim. So the first lashon was Abai said Allah, and then we proved it from the stira. The other lashon that we have now is that Abai started with a stira, and in order to prevent the stira, he came out with a stira. So now we learned Tina Abai Harabazel Kosher, which are Mishnah Vatanya Psulu and the Brisa. It's possible. On that Abai responded, Loi Kasha. Amar Abai Loi Kasha. Kancha Rosh Hashanah Megia Tzadik Shozeh. Kancha Rosh Hashanah Magia Tzadik Shozeh. Zog to Gemara weiter. Amar of Marion, Amar Rabbi Shuban Levi. Ramila Tani Rabba Bar Mori Mishum Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. State tomorrow yesh begai ben Hinan. There's two. The column Rashi says in the place called Gay ben Hinam, which Rashi says is Samech Yerushalayim. If I'm not mistaken, Gay ben Hinam is just south of the old city. I think that's where they place Gay ben Hinam. There's a video on the Ir David website that shows where Gay ben Hinam is. But Oila Oshin Mibneim, and there's smoke that's coming out from in between these two the column. V'zeu sheshaninu.
Also video?
What's that?
Is the smoke also on the video?
No. No, it's not a video. So maybe that's not the right place then. So there's two Tamaris and Gaben here, Va'oila Oshem Mibneim, and there's smoke that comes out in between them. V'zeu sheshaninu, and this is what we learned. Tina Haribazal Cheris, V'zui Pischa Shavim. So those Tamarim have these type of trees that are Tina Haribazal, and they're kosher because those leaves, I guess, cover over each other, and that's the entrance of Gehenna. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. Lulav sheyesh by shloisha tfachim. We learned in the Mishnah if a lulav has 3 tfachim kidei lehei aches ba, it's going to be kosher. So let's see how long this lulav has to be. Zok Gemara Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel Shir hadas the arava, the length of the hadas and of the arava, the shloish has to be 3 tfachim. The lulav and the shir of the lulav has to be 4 tfachim. Arba. Why? Kedei sheyehei lulav yoytza mina hadas tefach. So the lulav should extend higher than the hadas, at least a tefach. Let's see Rashi. Shey lulav yoytza l'mayla mina hadas tefach. Kishem shu gavoya b'minoi mikulon. I'm not sure what this means. The same way that it's higher in its min from all of them. I guess since it's naturally taller, it has to be at least a tefach higher than the hadas and the arov. We have Parnach Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shedra Shalulov, Tzarech Sheyetzim Nehadas Tefach. The Shedra, Rashi says, Shedra is Levad Meha'alim. So never mind that the top tip of the lulav has to be a tefach above the adasim. Rather, the top of the Shedra has to be a tefach, which means the leaf would be even higher. Let's see the full Rashi. Levad Me'alim, Sheha'alim Aruchem Lamaila. The leaves extend even higher than the end of the shedra. So once the top of the shedra is reached and there's only a leaf, that nothing else grows out of that leaf, that extends even more. So that means it would be 3 tvachim to match the height of the hadas, a tefach of shedra, and then a little bit extra, which is what the length of the leaf would be. So it has to be actually longer than 4 tvachim, according to Parnach Hanabir. So now we learn. Lulav sheyesh gimel tfachim kedei linanei boy. A lulav that has 3 tfachim in order to be able to shake it, kosher. Correct the Gemara, that's shver, because we just said that you need 3 plus, you need 4 tfachim. Yet the Mishnah says you only need 3 tfachim kedei linanei boy. So the Gemara, ema u kedei linanei boy. But the Mishnah means if a lulav has 3 tfachim and another tefach to be able to hold it, to shake it, that's kosher. Either it's the extra tefach of shedra plus the leaf, like Rabbi Yochanan said, or just an extra tefach of. So Rashi ema uchadelan and heyaboy, mashiyoytel and malam and eged, who amin aneya. So I guess what it means is the 3 tefachim that you're holding on to, and the little extra that sticks out past above where they're tied together, that's the part that shakes. The machadish the shmul tefach im olav. According to Shmuel, you only need a tefach extra, including the extension of the leaves. But Rabbi Yochanan tefach shedra, and according to Rabbi Yochanan, it'd be a tefach shedra plus the leaves. Tashma, we learned another price. Shir hadas by Rava shloisha. The shir of the hadas and the Rava is 3. The lulav arba, which seems to indicate that the total height from the bottom of the lulav to the top of the lulav is 4, which would be a right to Shmuel that you only need a total of 4 tefachim. And it'll be shver Rabbi Yochanan who says it's 4 tefachim plus the leaves. Now, come on, my love, bahadi lavin, bahadi alan. Wouldn't you say that when the Braj says arba, it means including the leaves, it's full length? It means besides the leaves. But about with the leaves, it's even going to be taller than 4 tvachim. So Rashi, my lava had the alan or kufta Yochanan, and the Gemara, no, this stems like a Yochanan as well. Gufa zok Gemara. Shir hadas v'arova shloisha. The shir of a hadas and a rov is 3 tvachim. The lulav and the shir of a lulav arba is 4 tvachim. The tarvanaimer ba'ama bas chamisha tvachim. When we're measuring tvachim, we're measuring an amma with 5 tvachim. Dr. Rashi, what does it mean ba'ama bas chamisha tvachim? Kasal kadaite. At this point, this is what the Gemara thinks we're talking about. V'hachik amar tzorich liyos hadas v'arova amma bas chamisha tvachim. So right now, the Gemara thinks that Reb Tarfon is arguing on the first shita. Reb Tarfon is saying that it's not enough to have a hadas and a arava of 3 tvachim. Rather, the hadas and the rava has to be an amma 5 tvachim. In other words, it has to be 5 tvachim. So amma rava. So Rava said, "Sharele morele Reb Tarfon," which Rashi means Rashi yimchal Reb Rebbeinu. The Rebbeinu Shalom should be Michael Reb Tarfon for saying wrong shot. Claimer tzarich ulabakish mechila al dvar. Reb Tarfon is wrong. You cannot argue that the hadasim and the rubbish should be 5 tvachim. Hashta avois shloisha loy mashkechinan bas chamisha. Hashta avois shloisha loy mashkechinan. You can barely find 3 tvachim of a good hadas, bas chamishim avoy. You're never going to find 5 tvachim of a good hadas. The Rashi avois shloisha loy mashkechinan. It's so difficult to find hadasim that are full 3 tvachim of avos. So it looks like it's braided, which means kalua, can mean kliya. It looks like it's braided like a chain. Come on, like the Gemara is going to say later. Most of the long hadasim are hadashoita, where you don't have the 3 together, the 3 leaves together. And Reb Tarfon is going to be so makbid to force us to buy 5 tvachim long hadasim that has all the leaves properly. It'll be impossible. Could you imagine what that would cost us? Right? Kiyasa Ravdimi Amar Ama Bashisha tvachim. Ravdimi said, he explained what Reb Tarfon meant. He said, Ama Bashisha tvachim Aseyasa Bas Chamisha and say mehem Shloisha Lahadas Vashar Lelulav. Let's see Rashi. What does that mean? He explained what Reb Tarfon meant, and Avada, he didn't mean that you need a hadas that's 5 tvachim. And this is what he said. The Reb Tarfon Chomerzuti. Yes, Reb Tarfon is being machmer, but it's not such a big problem. The Yunami Shloisha Ka'amar. Reb Tarfon also meant that you only need a hadas that's 3 tvachim. Ella shemishar b'tvachim gedolim. What he's suggesting is use larger tvachim when you count the 3 tvachim. And this is what Reb Tarfon commented at Tanakama, who said you need 3 tvachim. He said at tvachim elu, the 3 tvachim of the length of the hadas and arava, you gedolim. There should be larger tvachim. Sheyiu chamisha mehen min malin ama beinin shen shisha tvachim beinin. So normally, if you have an amma that's 6 tvachim, divide it by 5, and count 3 of those 5 sections, and that should be what it is. So really, it's only going to be about 20% longer than the standard 3 tvachim. Kamahava, what are they? It's talsa the talsa chamshe. It's 3 tvachim and 3/5. It's 3 tvachim and 3/5 of a tefach, so it's not so much more. That's Rashi Amma Bashisha tvachim. Chatoich b'tvachim gedolim. Take an amma of 6 tvachim and cut it up into 5 pieces of what we'll call tefachim gedolim. Make 5 parts out of an amma of 6 tvachim. And with each of those 5 parts, tishayir shloisha lahadas b'tevach yoyser. You should have 3 tvachim for each hadas, and vashar lulav haravi sheisat lulav yehei b'tevach gadol kei. And the same thing with the 4 tvachim of the lulav. That extra tefach should also be a larger tefach. How much will it work out to in small tvachim? It would work out to 3 regular sized tvachim, which would each be 1/6 of an amma, but an additional 3/5 of a tefach. So that's really all that he's adding. Correct the Gemara. Kasha the Shmuel. Yes.
What's interesting is that Reb Tarfon lived many generations before Rava, and Rava also, I believe, lived in Bavel, and Reb Tarfon lived in Eretz Yisrael. And yet still Rava says that Reb Tarfon had to have been making a mistake. Meaning maybe the Hadassim were more available in where Reb Tarfon lived and in Reb Tarfon's time. Yet still Rava says that many generations later, if Reb Tarfon's halacha would have been correct, we would have been in trouble. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but Rava is actually saying it like a tiny Reb Tarfon. Yimchalai Rebbeinu. Right. If in Reb Tarfon's days that was accessible and things only change now, so it's not an avla of Reb Tarfon. It's mashma. Rava says Reb Tarfon, you're doing an avla, you're making your generation and your people suffer.
Right.
Right. I'm sorry.
But that's a question. But that has to be a question because how would Rava know that it's not going to be available in Reb Tarfon's time and in Reb Tarfon's place?
Oh, you mean Reb Tarfon was much later than Rava?
Much earlier. Reb Tarfon was a contemporary of Rabbi Akiva.
So Reb Tarfon was a Tana.
Rava was an Amayra.
Rabbi Akiva was a Tana.
Rabbi Akiva was a Tana, and Reb Tarfon was a contemporary of Rabbi Akiva.
So Reb Tarfon was a Tana.
Yeah, for sure.
And Rava would have known what was available in Reb Tarfon's days.
He would have, or he would not have.
He would have. He can't know what would be in the future, but he probably could know what it was in the past.
Okay, and he also was in a different area. Rava was in Babylon. Rava was in Bavel. Reb Tarfon was in Eretz Yisrael.
I hear it. He must have been knowledgeable, otherwise he wouldn't have made such a sharp comment against Reb Tarfon.
Okay, unless his sharp comment is saying that Reb Tarfon's halacha is la'olam vod. And it's impossible that Reb Tarfon would say a halacha that we would have such difficulty
even in the future. It would be hard. So you think Reb Tarfon was such a gadol that how's it shaykh that he would say something that wouldn't be accessible even later on?
Yeah, and you notice Rava doesn't use such a sharp attack wordings. He doesn't use such sharp words against Reb Tarfon. He did in plenty of other places in the Gemara. They're even sharper on other. But here he's gentle, even though he's very upset.
I hear. But Avada, he wasn't really attacking Reb Tarfon. He was trying to make a point that you must have misunderstood Reb Tarfon.
Yeah,
he must. We must not understand Reb Tarfon because there's no way Reb Tarfon would have said that. And in fact, Reb Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael and said, "Yeah, you're right. That's not what Reb Tarfon. That's not what Reb Tarfon meant. He meant, in fact, just a little bit of a 20% increase, which, although it's a little difficult, it's not a Charlie Murray difference."
Right. I only wanted to point out Rava is in a different time and a place. Very different time. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's good. It adds perspective. The whole matzah over here. We do have a contradiction between Shmuel and Shmuel because Hacha Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Here Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, Shir Hadas Rava Shloisha. The Shir Bahadas, and then the Rava is 3 tvachim. V'Hasam Amar Rav Huna Amar Shmuel, and over there somewhere else the Gemara says Halacha Reb Tarfon. It says Halacha Reb Tarfon. Zok the Gemara Loidak, which means Loidak Shmuel b'Shiurei v'Nokat Shloisha. Maybe when Shmuel said that it has to be 3 tvachim, he wasn't medayik. Really, it means 3 tvachim plus 3/5. Like we had this when we were discussing the minimum area of a sukkah, and Rav Yochanan said 24 people have to be able to sit around in a circle. So the Gemara said, when do you say someone was loidak? He wasn't precise. When he added a little bit more, he made a chumrah. So there, even if you followed his words, it wouldn't come to being over an aveira for not being the kind of mitzvah. But lakula mi amrin loidak. Would we say that Shmuel would say only 3 tvachim when in fact you need more? If people follow Shmuel's psak precisely, they'll end up not being yoy to the mitzvah of Araminim. Tiyasa Ravin Amar Amabas Chamisha Tvachim an amma of 5 tvachim, asay oisa shisha, make it into 6. So this is the opposite, lakula. Say mehen shloisha lahados, use 3 of those measurements for the hados. Bashar lulu, kama havalahu, treya palga. Now you're not even going to have a full 3 tvachim of an amma bas chamisha tvachim. You're only going to have 2.5 tvachim. So that's how he's learning Raparfin. He's learning Raparfin the opposite. Raparfin's going lakula. So Rashi Amma Bas Chamisha Tvachim Beininim Chaloik Oisal L'Shisha Chalochim Tvachim Ktanim. Take 5 Tvachim, split it into 6 Tvachim, and count 3 of those smaller Tvachim. Ubahen Shir Shloish Lahadas Varbal Lulav Raparfin lakula. The way Shmuel is learning, the way Rabban is explaining. Rav Tarfon is not like Rav Dimi, who learned that it's larger tvachim. Rather, he learned, in fact, that the Tarfon is being makel with smaller tvachim. And this is how it makes sense in the Brisa. So, the Tanakama, because Rav Tarfon was commenting on the Tanakama. Those 3 tvachim with which we are measuring the Hadas and the Rava, and normally 3 tvachim. Chatzi amahin is a half of an amma. Zogt Rav Tarfon tvachim alolu ketanim yiyu. These tvachim should be small tvachim. V'lo yehu eli chatzi amma b'amas bas chamisha. Take a half of an amma, but not a half of an amma of 6 tvachim. Take a half of an amma of 5 tvachim, and in fact, you're going to end up having smaller. You're going to have smaller hadasim than the full 3 tvachim. In fact, the more but soif kasher the Shmuel and the Shmuel. It's still a steer in Shmuel, because Shmuel said you need 3 tvachim, which would be 3 big tvachim, and now you're saying that he holds like a tarp and you only 3 small tvachim. And that Dr. Gemara is leidak Shmuel b'shir shlosh tvachim. Your sagi b'trei apalakar tarp, and really 2.5 is enough. But when you said 3 to simplify things, he was leidak, and in fact he's erring on the side of caution. So really only 2.5 tvachim for each of the Hadasim or the Ravas, and Shmuel said use 3 tvachim. Okay, Gavalta. Let's see the Gemara weiter. We have a little bit of time still. Hados Hagozel, a Hados that was stolen by Yavish, which parallels the first Mishnah, puzzle. Shalasher v'shalir anidachas puzzle. Niktam roisha inifra to olav, oisha hayu anavav merubois me'olav. So now we've introduced a new psul that applies not to a lulav, but it applies to a Hados that has too many berries on it, puzzle, the meat and kosher, but if you remove the berries, it's kosher, the ain the Yom Tov, but you're not allowed to remove berries on Yom Tov. Let's see Rashi. Nifrit olive, noshru means they fell off, so that's how we're explaining nifritu on the Hados, that they fell off completely, because nifritu, that they just spread out, doesn't really make sense by a Hados. But actually, by nifrit olive we touched there also that it's disconnected from the shedra. Anavav, peri, shaboy, shadoim anavim. It's not really grapes; it's berries that look like grapes. Tanarabam, anav eitz avos. That is how the Torah describes the hados. And we learn that what does it mean? Sha'anafav chayfinis eitzah. Its leaves cover its stem. Ve'ezehu hava'omer zehados. I would say pashat pshat. That's the hados. So pshat anav eitz avos. Shekuli olive. It has to look like it's braided. It has to be completely covered with leaves. Since all of the leaves combined look like a braid, which covers over the stem, that's where it comes. That's where the word anaf eitz avos comes from. In fact, maybe it's an olive branch. Rashi, why an olive branch? Why would that be appropriate to meet the description of anaf eitz avos? Because also kuloi alim aruchan eretuvim. It also has long, steady leaves. Since there's very many leaves on an olive tree, each twig would also be covered with leaves. So tomorrow by eating olives, it has to appear to be braided, and that feature is not found on an olive tree. And that you don't have. In fact, tomorrow by dulva, Rashi says dulva is eitz armon kishtinayer. Kaluhu, it also looks braided. Even though the leaves look braided, but they're not thick enough and steady enough to cover over the branch. So tomorrow, enough of the chayvin, you need that its leaves should cover its stem. The leked, you don't have that. If anybody has an art scroll, can you look up what the dulva tree is? What is this Eitz Arman? Tashtanar? I don't know what these things mean.
Says a chestnut tree.
Chestnut. Okay. Taking of Ema Hirduf. Rashi also says there, Kamin Kliya Asuin Alav. Does the art scroll say what a hirduf is? Okay. Amar Abaye,
Hirduf is a hirduf.
Oh, okay. I should have known. Oh, there's a picture of it? It has Kliyos, but it's not. It has everything. It's more about. There's a problem with Darkinoim. Why is that? But Rashi Darkinoim.
Article says that's the tree that was used that Moshe used to sweeten the water.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, geweldig. So the Ched Darkinoim, the high rivers, Boris and Darkinoim. This cuts your hand. It damages your hand like thorns. So Rosei Alav Asuin Chadin Kamachat. Its leaves are very sharp, and Hashem wouldn't tell us to use for the Arba Minim something that's leaves are sharp. Veleka. Rava Amar Mehacha. Rava says we learned it from a different place. Ha'emes v'shalom ha'chevod. Rashi says the devotion loves us with emes and shalom. V'zeh eini loy emes v'loy shalom shu asi l'sama mafis. I'm not sure if the actual leaf is poisonous or if it's just because it's going to hurt. I don't know. I'm not sure if that means if the reason why it's a sound mob is because it hurts, or if it's because it's something that's actually.
Art scroll says it has sharp, prickly leaves,
and that's why that's why it doesn't combine.
Since it's painful and unpleasant to hold, it can't be the species that the Torah commanded us to take.
Uh-huh. So let's.
Oh, and then it says, "Oh, sorry." There's a pasuk from Zechariah. Doesn't fulfill the stipulations of truth or peace because the plant is poisonous for animals. Poison is not conducive to maintaining just and harmonious relations with others.
Okay, perfect. So there's two svars. Either it's poisonous or it's simply sharp and dangerous. Tanarabun. See what time it is? Well, we have 1 more minute. Tanarabun. Kulua.
It seems I speak that Taisvis seems to argue on Rashi that it's not because of the thorns necessarily. It's not Samamavis, I mean. And that's why I think Art Scroll doesn't quote Rashi. I imagine Art Scroll is quoting Taisvis.
Art Scroll references both.
Both, okay.
So
all right, sorry, Yosy.
No, shkoyach, yeah. Tanarabun. Kulua kamin kliya. Kulua means it's like a braid. It looks like a braid. The doimel shalosh, and it looks like a chain. Zeu hadas. Those are the features of a hadas. Anaf eitz avois, and we learned that it's eitz shetam eitza upir yeshava. It's wood and its peiros taste the same. Have omer is a hadas. That tells me it's a hadas. I never tasted the leaves of the hadas, nor did I ever taste the stem of the hadas. But the hadas also has that feature, which is a little bit difficult because if I'm not mistaken, David Zolti told us last night that the Rebbeinu Shalom, when he created the peiros and the trees, he said, I want all of the peiros to be tam eitza upir yeshava, and only the esrog listened, no other plant listened. But according to this pshat, according to Blessed Ben Yaakov, it seems like the plant that the Hadassim listened as well. Tanya, we learned eitzav is kosher, the she'einav is possible. If it's braided, it's kosher. If it's not, it's possible. Hechadam yavis, what does it mean? Braided, Amar Yehuda, with a kaima tlosa tarpi bikina. You have to have Zakrashi, tlosa. The chat kina means shloisha alam the kam echad yotim mitayk uketz echad. You have to have 3 leaves growing out of the same point in the stem. Rav Kahana says afilu trei v'chad. Even if you have shnei alam Rashi, shnei alam b'uketz echad, v'al echad milamata v'al v'rachav l'shnayim. Even if you don't have all 3 growing out of the same plane, rather one's a little lower and it leans on and it covers over the other 2 that are growing out together, a little higher than it, that would also be kosher. He bedafke wanted that type of hadas, which would seem to be deficient. You don't have 3 leaves growing together, you only have 2 and one just below it. Why? Since Rav Kahana issued a psak about it, he bedafke wanted to use that type. Rashi trei v'chad, shnei alam b'uketz echad, v'al echad milamata v'al v'rechav hashnayim. Mahadar trei v'chad, aval gav, the tlasa b'chatchina kosher in the kosher, even though everybody agrees that you have 3 stems growing out of the same place, for sure it's kosher. But since Rav Kahana was matter, this he b'dafka wanted to use this. It must have been a chusid. Helv another mepuma the Rav Kahana. Zok Tamar Amali Mar Bar Meimer Ravashi. Mar Meimer told Ravashi, Abba lahu hadash shoyta karila. My father would call that a hadash shoyta. Abba lahi the trei v'chad hadash shoyta karila. So not only wouldn't he use it to be the kind of psaka Rav Kahana, he holds it's called the hadash shoyta, and I guess he wouldn't allow you to use it at all. Okay, let's stop here, and then we'll be mamshech tomorrow. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. I get in the Chodesh.